Hello, and welcome to Fist of Firsts, the podcast where I try and find out what makes the funny people who make us laugh tick. I'm Tim Reed. I'm a TV sitcom writer, and I'll be asking some of our finest comedians and comedy writers a bunch of first-time questions to uncover the pivotal moments in their life, their career, and their creative process. I want to find out how the people who think differently think, so that we can all learn from the method behind their madness and be more creative. In this episode, I'm chatting to Nina Gilligan. Nina is one of the finest and funniest comedians on the circuit, which is why she's been showered with awards, including winning the prestigious Leicester Mercury Comedy Award in 2021. And she's won the Yorkshire Comedy Awards Best Act 2023, the North West Comedian of the Year in 2023, the Chorlton Best Club Comedian in 2023. 2023 was a good year for her, wasn't it? And then in 2024, Nina won the BBC Audio Best Sitcom winner for Where To Mate, a Radio 4 sitcom. We caught up in Edinburgh at this year's Fringe, which is why the audio is a little bit echoier than normal. That's Scotland for you, it's echoey up there. And Nina's a regular up at the Fringe, and this year she was performing Goldfish, her new show. It's her third full-hour Edinburgh show. And she's taking Goldfish on tour now, this year and into next year. And Goldfish was a show that Rolling Stone magazine listed as one of their top 10 must-see shows of the 2024 Fringe. In this episode, Nina tells me how at just 16, she ran a comedy club in Manchester with the likes of Steve Coogan, Henry Normal and Caroline Aherne. And she tells me how she's found a kind of spiritual awakening in the middle aisle of Lidl. Enjoy. Nina Gilligan, how lovely to see you.
How lovely to see you, Tim.
This isn't our first rodeo, is it? You've done my pod before.
I've done your pod before, and we were reminiscing, weren't we? Because it was 9 years ago.
9 years ago, yeah. Inside Funny Minds, it was called.
It was.
So it's very similar to what I'm doing now, but this is just 9 years
better. I feel like this is the new and improved
I think
iteration.
So. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you heard any of this series?
Yes, I have.
Did you? Well, I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't, because you know who else hasn't? My brother. I know. My brother can't listen to it. Because he says you use the same condescending voice you used to use when we were kids.
Oh,
I know. So
and now he grates on him.
It grates on him, yeah. So he can't. I think he'd like to listen to it, yeah, but he just can't bring himself to do it. That's awful, isn't it? Is that awful of me or him?
I think it's fair. I think because when you're presenting yourself to the world, whether it's like comedy or doing a podcast,
yeah,
I think you are putting on a slightly different mask.
Do you think?
And I think like your family don't always find it that authentic, do they? When I first started stand-up, I was a bit more of a character.
Yeah?
I don't think my brother liked it.
Really?
Yeah, he was a bit like, you don't really seem like you.
Yeah, but then in some ways you really are you. It's just, I suppose it's a different...
It's a different version of you, but if it's not the one that kind of aligns with what they think of you, it's almost like... jars a bit.
Maybe
and
that's it.
It's very important in the Northwest to be authentic.
Yeah.
Being inauthentic in the North is punishable by death.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I mean, you see you see corpses by the roadside everywhere, don't you? Especially that A34 on the way into Manchester as you get into the authentic zone.
Yeah.
People are spotted being fake. It's the same in the Midlands. We like authenticity there. So I'll try and be as authentic as I can. I'll try and be authentic as I can this series.
You are doing very well.
Thank you, Nina. Well, let's crack on.
Yes.
So if you've heard it before, you'll know that what I often do is I start with the Fist of Firsts first-time cards, so just random cards. But we're not going to do that today, are we? Because we were just talking about you getting into tarot and you've got a new card, so... Why use my Fist of First cards when you've got...
Yeah, can I just preface this with, I've always said that I thought all this stuff was absolute BS. So, but I met a friend and one of my gags used to be never trust a new friend that turns up to your house with a crystal. But somehow, as I'm getting more and more into middle age and the deficit in the health service is so bad, I'm turning to witchcraft.
We all need something to fall back on, do we?
I know. So my friend who was doing tarot kind of got me into it. She did a reading, and then I saw a pack of tarot in Lidl, of all places. Lidl, the middle aisle.
The well-known home of all things spiritual.
yeah. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm just going to buy these and give it a go.
Yeah.
So now I do this practice where I sort of pull myself a daily card.
Yeah.
And it's quite nice. It's quite uplifting because even if it's not mystical, I think you can sort of draw something from it.
Take something from it.
Yeah.
So does it give you like a kind of focus for the day or a bit of like motivation or
I think it's interpretation. I think what it does is it's whatever's lurking in the back of your mind, it sort of brings it forward.
Yes, so it allows you to tap into your subconscious somehow. And legitimize whatever it is you've found.
So whatever it is, like, I just think it just gives you that focus of the thing that's nagging you or the thing that you want to hear. It allows that to happen. Yeah,
got you. So should we do the tarots then?
Yeah, okay.
Right, you ready?
So you're meant to keep tarot in something like a silk scarf. So I'm unraveling my silk scarf for my very mystical Lidl tarot cards.
Was the scarf from Lidl?
The scarf wasn't from Lidl. It was from the Northern Quarter out of a bin of scarves that cost £1, and it's from the 1970s. I am a very high-end girl.
Yeah. Well, I reckon there will be lots of stories in that scarf then that will be wrapping themselves.
Yeah. And then what you have to do is you take the pack. I think you meant to surround yourself with golden light, some sort of golden shower that sounds more sexual than it should. And then you shuffle the pack. And now I'm splitting the pack. I don't know what you call that. I'm not a croupier. Then you put the pack together, and then now I'm turning over what is my card of the day. Oh, it's a good day.
Is it? What have you got?
I've got the Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune. Oh, that definitely sounds good.
Yeah, so the very short explanation that I've got on the Lidl pack is elevation of money overseas and completion phases, but it's sort of you're having a good day card.
Overseas as well. I mean, we're up in Scotland.
We are, it's not overseas.
No,
it's
but
attached
it's foreign though, isn't it?
I don't think you should ever call Scotland foreigners. You're going to get drummed
Will, you
out.
might need to edit that bit out.
But what I think the point with the tarot is you would say to whoever you're doing the reading for, what does that bring up for you?
Yes.
And what that brings up for me is, because I'm third day of the run.
Yeah.
And I've been a bit overwrought.
So you're 3 days into this one, which is called Goldfish.
Yeah, it's called Goldfish.
Yeah.
And I've been a bit overwrought and a bit stressed and a bit in that zone of, oh God, is this any good? So that card to me is quite settling.
Which is brilliant, but should also be doubly settling because it's also come on the day when you've got quite a good review in Beyond the Joke, haven't you, today, that we were just reading before?
I know.
I say quite good. It's a very good review.
Yeah.
That should be settling as well, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and don't tell my PR because I'd actually asked for a complete media blackout on that.
Had you? Yeah. What? On the fact that you've had that good review?
No, so what happens is PR give you the option of, do you want to read reviews? Because some people get completely thrown off.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So you're not supposed to have read it yet.
So I'm not supposed to have read it. But I think because I was feeling so overwrought and so lacking in confidence, what I did this morning was I doom scrolled. And it was like a Russian roulette moment. It was like, will I, won't I open this?
So you scrolled, you found it, and your finger hovered over it.
Hovered over it. Well, I pulled the trigger. It's lovely.
It is lovely.
But I've told myself, and I do this with this tarot as well, I tell myself, because there are some bad cards in that pack.
Yeah.
I tell myself, right, I'm not going to pull another card. I'm not going to read another review. That's it now. That's enough.
Done.
Yeah. No more.
You've got self-affirmation. You're happy. You've got it.
Yeah.
But you keep going back, don't you?
Let's not just keep pressing that dopamine button.
Yeah, but we all do.
Oh, don't.
It's a terrible thing, isn't it? But maybe that's why people like you get into stand-up for that. Do you get that kind of a satisfying hit out of doing it?
Yeah.
Does it feel like it now, 3 days into?
I'm not having it now. like I think we were talking before, like, and I'm sure there's lots of people feeling the same way, is that because you're doing your new hour, you're really reaching around in the dark. It's still very unstable. It feels like it's not on its feet, and you can't stand back from it enough to know whether it's any bloody good.
Yeah.
But I think once you're really into it, you really know it, and it's polished, that's when you can take some
And
joy
in your
out
experience, having you've been on the circuit, a long time, when are you expecting that moment to come where you go,
I don't
right,
think
I'm into the
it's ever
zone?
completely predictable, but like you can go to a gig and then you can go on and the magic happens somewhere between your connection with the audience, your material, the night, and it just all comes together. And suddenly you're pirouetting.
Yeah.
And that just...
And you don't know when it's going to be.
No, you don't know when it's going to be.
So
There's only so much of it you can control, I think.
Yeah. And so going back then to the beginning, when did you first think, do you know what, I'm funny?
I can tell you, I can pinpoint exactly when I knew I wanted to be on stage.
Yeah.
So we were in the school hall and I was around 11 and we were watching an Inspector Calls.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had an overwhelming desire to do that.
Really?
I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Because I'd only ever seen maybe a panto with my dad.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that? I want to do that. The serious talking.
Yeah.
And then I had an amazing drama teacher who just died this year at 90.
Oh.
She was a Catholic missionary.
Yeah.
But also took us to see things like Bertolt Brecht.
Yeah.
And performance art. She was mental.
Yeah.
And she got me to do an Alan Bennett play.
When you say do it, you mean like perform it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like really funny in it. And I was only little.
Yeah.
And I got the bug for the funny.
Yeah.
So I really got into, and then I did all different kinds of funny plays and they would always put me in the funny part.
Yeah.
And I got the bug for that.
So I suppose acting in a funny play is the closest you can get at that age.
Yeah,
so as a
because
teen,
I wouldn't have understood the link at that point between being in a comedy play and stand-up, even though I was kind of obsessed with stand-up through the TV and watching it, because I grew up in a male household. Gosh, that sounds a bit sexist, but my mum wasn't around and I was with my dad and my brother. And we were watching Billy Connolly all the time. We were watching all the ITV stand-ups on the shows that were the talent shows.
Yeah.
And I was consuming an awful lot of comedy. Me and my brother then went on to be watching Blackadder and we would do it.
Yeah.
So I was consuming tons of comedy.
Yeah.
But I hadn't yet made the link between stand-up and what I was into.
Yeah.
And that link didn't come till perhaps I was around 16.
Yeah. So what happened then?
So I was doing a lot of drinking. And there was an amazing pub in Manchester, outside East Manchester in Ashton, called the Witchwood, where Coogan and Henry Normal were hanging out. And I'd started as a project from college putting on gigs for Amnesty International.
Yeah.
And I was getting them to do gigs at the green rooms in Manchester.
Wow, at 16, so you were like running your own night.
Yeah, and I had Lem Sisse on.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of started to understand that I wanted to somehow be part of that scene. And I'd met Bob Dillinger, and my friend was going out with him, and my friend was going out with Steve Coogan.
Right.
So I was sort of slightly on the periphery of this scene up until being around 19.
Yeah. So when would this have been? Like,
so late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
So I was fascinated by all that, and I did a bit of MCing.
Did you? I was going to say what a creative place Manchester was.
Incredible.
At that time.
So, and we came up to Edinburgh, coming full circle, in a transit van to watch Caroline, actually.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe Edinburgh. I was like, I came from a dead zone in some ways, like a small town.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe what it was like. And I ended up moving here,
Did you?
thinking that this was the cultural centre of the universe.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they all carried on and became legends.
Yeah.
Not that I would have ever become a legend, you know what I mean? But I kind of left that scene behind and then stayed in Scotland.
Because of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival at that time and seeing Caroline here and...
Just feeling like we had some connections here. One of my friends started living here and got involved with the American and New Zealand travelling community. And
right.
Because they all come over for a couple of years travelling.
Yeah.
And we made connections and it was just a party.
Yeah.
So I came up and moved here when I was 19.
Wow.
And then I ended up in drama school at the Conservatoire in Scotland, Glasgow.
In
the Royal
Glasgow,
Scottish Academy,
And were you doing stand-up at that time?
I did a bit of stand-up.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of stand-up in Edinburgh. I did a character act at one point called Scylla Slack.
Tell us about, go on, Scylla Slag.
It was just a piss take of Scylla Black.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then I did a double act while I was in college in Edinburgh, briefly. And I had a really nice teacher. Well, she would be a lecturer when I was at college, because we did a module where we had to do some stand-up.
Uh-huh.
And she took me on one side and went, "You should do stand-up." And I was like, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah."
Is that while you were up here?
Yeah.
So, in Glasgow?
In Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh, right.
She went, "You should do..." It was before I went to drama school. She went, "You should do stand-up." And I was like, "Why?" And she was like, "There's something about you on stage, talking by yourself, that is very engaging." And I sort of was still on the road of being told from a child that I was a good actor.
Yeah. So in your mind at that time, was acting still, what was the aim at that moment when she said...
I was going to
you should
become
try
an
stand-up?
actor.
Yeah. Acting was the goal.
It was still in me. I still was flirting with that. I still loved comedy.
Yeah.
But I was still in the mindset of, I thought acting was my road.
Yeah. So what happened? She said you should try it.
So I did a bit.
Yeah.
Did a bit of Scylla Slack, did a bit of a double act.
Yeah.
Messed about. I got actually auditioned by Ken Loach for a film.
Did you?
Yeah. To do some stand-up in a film. Didn't get the part. Probably just as well. It was dreadful. I remember doing stand-up one night at a film preview that I'd been in a film called Blood Junkies. And that film ended up being bought by American fundamentalists because it dealt with blood products.
Wow.
And they destroyed it. I've still got a copy of that film.
Oh, so they bought it and destroyed it?
Yeah, because it
was...
Yeah, Blood Junkies. It was to do with the heroin. It was like, we went through a brilliant period where there was... Do you remember Dracula was made?
Yeah.
Yeah, with Gary Oldman.
Yes.
And there was loads of films about Dracula at the time.
Yeah.
So there was a B sort of...
Yeah.
What do they call them? Slot...
Yeah.
I can't remember the genre, but there was a film made in Edinburgh that was a sort of really high camp film. And I was in that, and I did some stand-up at that preview and died on my actual arse, I remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So talk to me about dying on your arse then at that point. What did that...
I think I sort of just thought, no, I'm out my depth.
Right.
I'm out my depth.
Why?
Because I remember I was heckled by a big group of men and I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, I just didn't feel that connected to a circuit or a
Yeah.
scene. I felt like I was dipping my toe in waters and they were too deep.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of lads who were actually on the circuit who I got to know, and I used to go and see them at gigs.
Uh-huh.
And I think they'd given me an open spot. But it was like, I just wasn't in it enough.
Yeah. So what changed from then? How did you get in it? Was it a long time later, or was
A long time
So you
later.
took a big gap from...
Huge. I took a gap from everything. So I graduated, went to London, got an agent, and got pregnant.
And that was that?
That was that. It was
for comedy.
Complete. It was, everything went.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I ever did, and it's the worst thing I ever did, because I loved bringing up my children. I'm an adopted person. Having children for me was like massively important.
Yeah.
It made me.
Yeah.
I was very chaotic.
Yeah.
And had I not had those children, they changed me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But everything creative went out the window because
Yeah.
I had to provide for them.
Yeah. So what were you doing then? Proper job?
So I was an arts worker briefly in Glasgow, worked with the homeless for a long time. I became a special educational needs teacher, as you know.
Yeah.
And then I worked with offenders for Greater Manchester Probation.
Yeah.
And then I had just a mental health crisis. And that's when I became a stand-up.
Yeah. I talk to all sorts of people in different, in the other thing I do, which is doing talks and training for businesses. And I often talk to younger people who're starting out in their career. And it's become a big theme that I talk about, the value of taking the road less travelled.
Yeah.
And not going straight from A to B.
Yeah.
In any kind of career or creative endeavour,
Yeah.
but finding your own and unusual and unique path, because it gives you a unique and more robust and more rounded set of life experiences to draw on in whatever you then end up doing.
Absolutely.
And so for you, that ended up being stand-up. Do you think that kind of unique Nina-only career path and life path has affected what you do now and how you do it?
I think so, because if I measure myself against my peer group now, I do think, sometimes I think, oh God, I wish it was a bit more like, I feel too old for my peer group. I worry about my age.
Really?
Yeah, so I watch the brilliant Dan Tiernans or, people that are in my peer group and kind of go, oh no, am I in the wrong place at the wrong time? But what you're saying is your road has brought you to the right place at the right time. I think that's what you're saying.
It was certainly, I'm really nicking that from Steve Jobs, because he did a big, going slightly off track, but you can find it on YouTube, I'm sure. Steve Jobs did what do they call it when they talk to like graduating students? Valedictorian or something. And he did one where he was basically saying, look, take the road less travelled. And he said, look, one of the best things that happened to him was getting fired from Apple, the company he set up, when he set it up, when he was pushed out, wasn't he? And then he said, I had a bit of a crisis. Then I went to art school because I just wanted to do it. And I fell in love with typefaces and all these different typefaces that were possible. And then he left and he did something else and he did something else. And the upshot was when he ended up going back to Apple and taking it back over, his views were now shaped by all that other stuff that he wouldn't have done otherwise. And so he then streamlined all their products, said, no, we just need to simplify, and brought in all these unusual typefaces so that Apple then wasn't just like Microsoft.
Yeah.
And having Comic Sans and Times New Roman, but had all of that and then turned it into what it is now.
I certainly believe that having that kind of open mindset and having lots and lots of experiences as a creative person doesn't do you any harm at all.
Yeah.
And being able to absorb as much as you can along the way isn't going to harm you.
Yeah, it's 100%.
I feel like sometimes we have to be careful when we buy into the American dream of if you just keep trying, you will break through.
Yeah.
Because for every success story, there's a million people that never made it.
Yeah, of course.
And I wonder what they've sacrificed to try. Because I'm always a little bit, and I suppose it's the working class person in me that's always like, I'm always a little bit worried that we can exploit people's dreams, and that's where you get BGT. Do you know what? Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But in terms of how you fill up your mind with creative ideas,
and stimulus,
the road less travelled.
Yeah, it's a huge way of doing that.
Yeah.
But you're right, you have to then know how to apply it and look for the opportunities where you can.
Because it's not true that if you keep, the Rocky Balboa idea, that if you keep knocking on the door, somebody will eventually let you in.
Yeah.
I don't
You just need to get to Nina 3.
Yeah, it's not true, is it?
Yeah. No. But for you then, what got you back into doing it? So you'd taken that big break, brought the kids up.
Yeah. So I had this mad scramble of I'm going to need to do something now.
Yeah.
I need to work. I need to bring more money in. I need to do something. I was applying for all these different jobs. My mental health was still really poor. And they'd given me one-to-one cognitive behavioural therapy. And it was a bit at this point like physician heal thyself, because I had been delivering CBT to offenders. So I had quite a good grounding in it.
Yeah.
And I got this really brilliant therapist through the NHS. And I worked with her. She was so good. And we'd set down some goals. And it was like, what can you do for you now? Just tiny things, tiny little things. I was so far away from being creative at this point. I just said, you know what? Just for me, I'd like to do something creative. She was like, well, what could that be? I said, well, I used to be an actor. She was like, did you? I was like, yeah.
But long buried.
So long buried. You'd have to excavate it. She said, well, how could you do that? I was like, I don't know. Is there any groups? I don't know. Maybe I could try, I don't know, maybe an Amdram. If you'd have said Amdram at drama school, they would have shot you out the back. Maybe I could try some Amdram.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, why don't you put that as a goal? So I went home and I reflected on it and took quite a long time. And I was like, maybe I should try a bit of stand-up.
Yeah. That's a big leap, isn't it, from going, even though you'd done it before, so maybe less of a leap, but for somebody who just thinks, do you know what? For my own creative outlet, for my own sanity, I'm going to go and try a bit of stand-up.
I know, it sounds mad when you're reflecting it back.
It does sound quite mad. So one, for a lot of people, that'd be hugely terrifying.
I also went on an
anxiety-inducing
course.
A which course?
An upholstering course.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I
so
did
it was
all
one or the
sorts.
other.
Yeah,
It was going to be.
I could have been a master upholsterer.
Yeah. Or you could have combined the two, a bit like Tom Daly does with his knitting and diving.
I know. I tried also.
So then you did go back to stand-up. What happened?
So I did one of these funny women where you have to pay, and I came to Edinburgh. It's like, again, a full circle moment, because there was no freaking way I was doing it anywhere near anybody could see me that knew me.
That's interesting. So you kind of found a safe space, but not just any old safe space to do it. The home of kind of, home of stand-up, really.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
Back to where I'd come.
How'd you go about, so you didn't have an agent at this point?
Applied for a competition. You had to pay £15, where you got a 5-minute slot.
Yeah.
You had to write 5 minutes, £15 to go and perform. And I was in the place. It was yesterday. George Square studio, in one of the little studio spaces in the buildings.
Yeah.
Studio 1 or whatever it is. And you went downstairs, and it was like a lecture theatre, like one of the uni lecture theatres. Yeah. And I was absolutely fucking appalled to find that the other people who are stand-ups watch you. Why are they not backstage?
So the ones you were kind of in the competition with, they all come around to watch?
I could not believe.
Were they supportive in the crowd or pulling faces?
So I was like, it's a bit like when you give birth to a baby and you give birth to the head and nobody tells you the shoulders are harder. There was bits of this experience that I was like, what?
Yeah.
You have to perform not in front of an audience, where I'm used to that I've got muscle memory for that.
Yeah.
But you have to perform in front of your peer group. What? I was nearly sick.
Really?
Yeah.
And how did it go?
It was all right.
What kind of year was this? Let's just think.
This was 2011.
Right.
August 19th.
Yeah, you remember?
Yeah. And I kind of became a little bit of a Mancunian scally character, and it got some laughs. And I remember a couple coming up to me after and going, it was really funny, that. And I was thrilled with myself.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I thought, live at the Apollo, we'll be phoning any moment now.
Yeah.
Still waiting. Just like you go through this delusional phase.
Yeah. Someone critical has watched and I'm going to get a buzz.
Absolutely delusional.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have that delusional phase, nobody would ever carry on.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you've got to have that
It's the same
sense
chemical, I think, that you release when you give birth to a child. Sorry to use that metaphor again.
Yeah.
But it's the same chemical that mothers have that takes you through the next 3 months without sleep. It's the love chemical.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's the oxytocin.
Yeah. And it gives you that drive, that need to keep going.
Because it's horrendous. What are you doing?
So what happens after that? So you've done a gig, you're pleased with yourself. I guess one, because you've done it. You know, you said to your therapist, I'm going to give it a try. You've done it, it's worked. So on the one hand, that's just big tick for courage and bravery and self-belief and all that kind of stuff. But also in terms of the talent, you've had this affirmation as well, this kind of this feedback that someone's gone, that was funny. So you won in both of those senses. So what happened next? What did you do next?
I feel like it woke me up a little bit. I had a purpose again, and very much in depression, they link, recovery to purpose or good mental health to purpose. Yeah. So it gave me a little bit of purpose. I went back to Manchester. I don't think I got another gig for about 3 months.
Right, so it's quite a while.
It's quite hard for anyone to take you seriously.
Yeah.
Some middle-aged woman just dropping in your inbox going, can I have a gig?
Even though you'd done Edinburgh, you got Edinburgh on your CV at that point.
Doesn't count at
Nothing,
that point.
Really?
No, nobody's interested. I paid to go on that gig.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
I got given a slot on a gig. I dropped the act. I did a couple of gong shows. I rewrote my set. And then there was a little bit of alchemy where I did a gig in Bolton, and I'll never forget that gig, and it was Railway Tavern. Doesn't exist now, but it was kind of critical where what we were talking about before happened. There was a 10-minute set I did that you've seen it about a vajazzle.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah.
And
it's a very funny 10 minutes. Did you say it's 10?
Yeah.
Was it 10? Yeah, I saw that in Bollington.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it must have been about that time, I suppose, 2012. This would have been
so I wrote that.
Yeah.
And it sort of took off with the audience. And there was a guy in the audience, Adam Rushton, he's an agent now, but at the time he was doing stand-up.
Yeah.
He was like, I think you can do stand-up, mate. He was like, you need to be out 4 or 5 nights a week. And my husband was there. He was like, can she get out of the house 4 or 5 nights a week? Because I need a driver and I'll get her spots.
Amazing.
And then I was on the road, and I was on the road.
Yeah.
And Adam Rushton, I love him to bits. He's a pain in the ass, but actually it was kind of the kick.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the job.
Yeah.
Suddenly I was on the circuit. I was doing car shares.
Yeah.
I was doing the thing, Tim.
Yeah, I know. Car shares so out of fashion now. It's just, no one does car shares anymore. It's a ridiculous idea. It was when we cared about the planet, didn't we? And
Not
with electric
anymore.
cars now. We don't need to car share.
Let it burn.
Yeah, let it go. And then obviously went on to great success because you're quite the award winner.
You know what? I feel like I've got quite a lot of awards, but I've not managed to convert them into much.
And what do you mean by much? What's next? Because obviously, so we'll get onto Goldfish in a minute. So it's a big new set that's now obviously getting you rave reviews that you're not reading yet. But in between, so you've won Chortle Stand Up of the Year. Was that? Yeah. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah. Mercury was the big one.
Mercury.
I think.
Is that the Leicester one, or?
Yeah, I mean, when you look down, I always look at that one and look at the alumni, and it's everyone that you've ever heard of, and then me, and they're like, "Who the fuck's that?"
Why do you think then? So, because anyone that's seen Nina, you are a brilliant stand-up.
Thank you.
You are, and it's no surprise to me, and wasn't when you started winning all of those awards. But there's a leap, isn't there, from kind of having that critical acclaim to breaking through into the mass public consciousness, I suppose.
I think the key is telly, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, the key is telly. I've had some wonderful experience recently last year, and it's probably the thing that's given me the most happiness. with the Radio 4
Yes.
Where To Mate.
Where To Mate, the Radio 4 sitcom.
Yeah.
And the award-winning
Yes,
Radio
the
4
award-winning Radio 4
Yeah.
Sitcom of the Year.
Yeah, it must still be available on BBC Sounds.
Yeah,
Go find
please
it.
go and find that. Like, that just gave me so much joy. Carl Cooper,
Yeah.
I think, is a genius. You know, he gave me a go.
Yeah.
And I felt I could rest on that.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about, like you say, more being in the public consciousness, that's where telly comes in, isn't it? And I never set out. I just set out to get over my depression.
Yeah.
So let's not get too greedy here.
Yeah.
Like, of course, it'd be nice,
Yeah.
but it's not critical.
No.
So I'm being slightly ungrateful.
Yeah, or just being ambitious. There's the other way of looking at it, is to think, no,
I think-
while I know I've nailed the craft,
Yeah.
you know, or, you know, as everyone, as far as anyone ever does, we're all constantly
Yeah.
developing. But why shouldn't you be thinking, you know, I want
Yeah, I mean, it
more
would be
people to know
lovely.
about it?
Don't get me wrong. It would
Yeah.
be lovely, wouldn't it, to do that?
Yeah.
And I know what's been really a game changer for me is, I think, when I brought on the socials last year.
Yeah.
And now I've got
Yes.
a fan base now.
Yeah. So through socials,
Yeah.
through being able to do that.
Yeah, so now I'm
More-
going on tour,
Yeah.
and I never thought I'd be able to do that.
Yeah, so you got the big tour starting.
Yeah, so
When
in
does-
September.
September.
Yeah, and the
Where can people find out about that?
Yeah, so if you go to my website at ninagilligan.co.uk, why couldn't I say that?
I don't know. You must
don't
have said
know.
it before.
ninagilligan.co.uk.
There you are, easy.
Or just go follow my pages or whatever.
Yeah.
But so that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully that says to, if there is any opportunities
Yeah.
elsewhere,
Yeah.
hopefully that proves there is a fan
Yeah.
base, you know.
Is it getting harder to get those TV opportunities, whether it's, you know, scripted, non-scripted?
I don't know, because I live in the north, so I don't feel like that's never really going to change for me.
No.
I feel very rooted,
Yeah.
as you are.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to know, to have the finger on the pulse in the same sense of
Yeah.
what those opportunities are.
Yeah.
And partly that's what Edinburgh is about, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. You know, it's the moment where everyone gets to showcase what they do, be seen, see other people, where the industry comes to kind of, you know, dip their toes into the water of.
And you never know, I might find a
Fresh
nice
talent.
writing partner too.
You never know. You never know if any such thing exists. Right, so now it's that part of the show where we visit the listeners' stories. Your stories in answer to last week's Fist of First challenge card. And if you remember last week, the challenge card was the first time you made the news. And what stories have you sent me in? None. Well, good. That means none of my foff-offs are criminals. Or willing to admit it. So I'll make this week's listeners' challenge a little less incriminating. So here we go. Shuffle the pack. And turn the top one over. What have we got? First TV show you loved. And why? The first TV show you loved. And why? Tell me a great story about the first TV show you loved. Or send in a weird one. So the most weird, interesting, funny, I'll read out in next week's episode. Okay, back to it. So, talking of the writing then, because you write as well, don't you? Obviously, and you know, everyone who
Yeah.
writes their own shows writes.
I never thought I would be able to write. That was the bit that stopped me doing stand-up, actually, because I was so convinced I was an actor.
Yeah.
Because when you go to drama school, the reverence for a script is so high
Yeah, that's interesting.
that you're told you're not a writer. And if there's a writer in the room, you have to ask them, can you change a comma?
Really? And
So-
do they then contemplate that?
Yeah,
and
they
think about
contemplate
it?
that very hard.
Smoke,
and then,
walk up and down a bit.
Yeah, and then
say,
come
"Go on
back
then."
and say, I think we'll change it to an and. So
See, that's not really what writing's like, though, is it? You know, now you
Now
know
I
you
know.
do it. It's about just getting.
now I know it's so much different, but at that time, my reverence for writing was so high. I thought it was only done by really intelligent people, that I was not one of them. I was just a monkey that
That's
could
so
dance.
interesting. Dance to other people's tunes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But now I've realised, I've got an imagination. I can make up stories. I can put them on paper.
Yeah.
That's what writing is.
Exactly that.
So little of writing is actually writing.
Yeah, it's not punctuation. All of that can be, that side of it.
Yeah.
It's computer generated now. The thing that AI or software can't do is imagine and create new stories, new characters, new shows. So when you're doing that and you're applying your imagination, if I can just unpick that a little bit, how Nina's brain works, is so where do you think your ideas come from? And how do you go about growing those ideas, developing them and harnessing them?
It's such an interesting question, isn't it? I think I'm very inspired by my own background and family and life and the environment that I grew up in, and to a certain amount injustice. And when I take an idea, I think it's a daydream for me.
That's interesting. So tell me about that. So what ideas kind of come and you allow them to swim in a daydream? Yeah,
I'd allow them to just sit in a daydream, because I really think that I'll play with an idea and then I'll think about it for a bit. So with Goldfish, I wanted to talk about memory. And for ages, I was thinking about the memory stuff before I even called it Goldfish. And then I was just in the GP one day looking at a picture of an elephant. I was like, oh, elephant memory. Oh, yeah, goldfish. Oh, right, that's a good name. And then I was going to sleep that night and I was like, I remember when I played that goldfish in a bowl for ITV weather.
Did you what?
I played a goldfish in a bowl for ITV weather.
Did you? Ah.
So I made that connection.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then I wanted to talk about sexual harassment.
Yeah.
And then I remembered something about the story of the goldfish in the bowl for ITV weather. And I thought, I wonder if I could make that into a metaphor. So then I just build connections.
Yeah.
Random connections.
Yeah.
And pull random connections together.
Yeah.
And allow them to be pulled together.
Yeah. And see what happens.
Allow the story to build itself.
Yeah.
I know we were doing the tarot earlier, but I read this book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic.
Big Magic, yeah.
And it's a little bit trippy hippie.
Yeah.
Which, like I say, I'm not really. But I like the concept of it. Because she uses this sort of metaphor of an idea is a sentient thing.
Yeah.
And it's in the air.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, it's going around tapping on creative people's heads.
Yeah.
Asking to be let in.
Yeah.
And eventually it will come to you. And it's whether you're open to let it in.
Yeah.
And she had a really weird experience where she'd written a book and then something terrible had happened in her life and she'd left it. And it's very, detailed outline of the plot. And then it ended up that a friend of hers ended up writing the same book because she'd left it alone too long.
So she hadn't shared it with her friend?
No.
It just went to her friend. Yeah.
And that also lets you let go of when another comedian uses similar conceit.
Yeah. Which happens all the time.
So rather than getting afraid of, these my ideas are the original and I need to hold on to them and not share them with the world because someone might steal them from me.
Yeah.
It's this idea that ideas are wandering around everywhere and it's about you being open to receiving them and to making connections.
That's such an interesting concept. Because I've always thought about, because when we first wrote and, delivered Car Share and it was then suddenly in the trade press, in Chortle and places like that, so other comedians could see this idea had got taken up. We were contacted by a few people saying, oh my God, we just started working on an idea about a car share. And so it's a very similar thing that, that idea was out there. And I partly put it down to collective consciousness, which is it's exactly the same concept, I think, in that, the way the world, all of our worlds are changing and stimulus that we're exposed to is all going on all the time. And so those connections are there to be made.
And we're a bit of antennae for
Yeah.
that.
Like a lightning rod kind
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
And it takes you away from being so egotistical in a
Yeah.
sense that you're so unique.
And we all do it. You know, we can't help, as humans, the world revolves around us to a certain degree,
Yeah.
isn't it? That's because just to get us through. But yeah, that's a lovely way of thinking about it, is that the ideas are out there and you've just got to be open to them. In other words, be really open-minded and receptive.
And she says one thing that I think is really nice as well. Again, a little bit silly, but she said, once you've got your idea and it's in place, so I got goldfish. She said, you know you're on the right track because little things will start happening that will reinforce it for you.
Right, yeah. So what, in terms of like just making you feel like I'm on the right track?
Yeah, so like random things. So I had someone I remembered later down the line that the person that had witnessed something that happened to me, their name, it was so closely related to the theme.
Yeah, really.
As to be bone shiveringly.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? So is that your subconscious having maybe
so.
already knitted that
I think
into
so.
it? Yeah.
I think that there is that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's mystical. I don't think it's magical. But I think it's about you allowing yourself to be.
Yeah, an affirmation
open.
coming in.
Yeah.
That actually all those connections
and
you've
then
made are real.
After that, there's the difficult bit. There's the really difficult bit, which I'm in now, which is the skill to deliver it.
To do it, make it happen. So tough. And I suppose the confidence, the more affirmation you've had around that idea being the right one, the more confidence and strength hopefully you've got in then delivering it, as well as needing the craft to deliver it, of course, you know, the ability. But that's what you've been working on.
Because it's not like
20
you
years.
can't just go, oh, you know what? I've got this idea. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's come to me. It's just the universe is on my side.
Yeah.
Then you're going to fall foul of it.
Yeah. Then it's the hard work.
You've still got to do the hard work.
Yeah. And the hard work is in making it happen.
Yeah.
Always. And whatever the idea is, the hard work is
the
then making it real.
That's the danger of like this sort of mystical tarot cardy thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we've all predestined.
Yes.
Because you're not. Because unless you get out of bed, unless you learn your words, unless you do all the things, this shit doesn't happen.
No, and put in the hard hours. And it is hard, isn't it, to perfect any craft.
Yeah.
Stand up more than any,
going
I
from 5
think.
minutes to an hour is a jump.
When did you first do an hour?
So I did my first hour in 2016.
Yeah, so that's not long after you come back up to Edinburgh to do that.
Yeah, so I did a show called Broad Shoulders, which was about my adoption and finding my family.
Yeah. And did you take that on tour?
No.
So this is the first tour coming up, the first big tour.
I had no...
Yeah.
That was my debut.
Yeah, here in Edinburgh.
Yeah, that would be your first hour that's considered your debut.
Yeah.
But it wasn't... It was great experience. I absolutely loved it because it was like effort in, satisfaction out. I came away going, oh my God, I did a thing.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
But this time, you've come here on the back of being in Rolling Stone's.
That was mad, wasn't it?
10 acts you have to go and see.
That's mad.
While you're up at Edinburgh. It's amazing.
Mad. That's crazy,
It's
Tim.
amazing. So the two things I want to do just to end. One is I do always put out a quick, even though, you know, this is the beginning of the second series. So there's a big gap out there. You know, I did get some listeners' questions. We're starting to get more and more foff-offs, my friends of Fist of Firsts, following and sending in listeners' questions. So there's been a big gap, but I put a shout out, and I've got a question for you. This is from Lisa from Pembrokeshire.
Oh, hello.
So Lisa says, what do you think the challenges are for a woman doing stand-up?
Such a good question, Lisa. I think... Like on an audience level, women make up sometimes more than 50% of the audience, and that's absolutely fantastic. But you still find, I will still almost on a weekly basis leave a show where somebody will come up to me and say, I don't like female comedians, but I found you funny.
Wow.
So... Unfortunately, though it's changing, those attitudes towards women, how somehow their brains are different, and somehow they can't produce laughter in another human being, I don't know where we're getting that from, and there's some genetic difference in us still persists.
Is it dying out? Is that getting less and less? Or
I don't know if it is, Tim, because when I went to my final gig the other week was in Runcorn before I came up, and my husband was just gobsmacked. So we'd arrived, there was a man at the door, he said, don't go in, it's shit. There's a woman on there, all they talk about is periods.
Wow.
And then he went on to be racist on top of that.
Well, it's going to be the same kind of person.
It's the same kind of person. But I shook his hand, not because of what he'd said, but just to put him back in his place. So when I'm the headliner, I'm doing very well, thank you very much, it pays the mortgage, just to shut him up.
Yeah.
But let's not do the thing where we put all Brexiteers or whatever in the same bit. You know, they're intelligent, very articulate people that say the same thing.
And often, I suppose, someone like that might be saying it thinking that that's what another, middle-aged white bloke wants to hear. Whether they think it or not, it's their lack of social skills sometimes. It's just the top of the list of what do I say.
I've heard that from men. I've heard that from women. Women will say the same to me. And they say it as a form of a compliment without realising.
They think they're being nice. But you're different.
Yeah.
You're not like the others. Mad, isn't it?
So that still persists. However, I think what's happening more industry-wide is that there's the clubs really do want to promote women. And I know I've got a great agent and that they're very pro-women. They're always making sure that there are women on the bill. They have a women in comedy festival every year. And the more, you've got to see it to be it, right?
Yeah, of course.
So the more of us that are there,
role models and representing.
That's how we change people's perceptions.
Yeah.
So that's
got to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think it tightens you up. Do you know? I think you have to be someone said something really good to me when I was in Altitude this year. They said a man's got 5 minutes in which he's given grace.
Really?
Yeah. Where a woman has got 5 minutes in which she has to prove herself.
Well, let's hope we keep pushing in the right direction.
Yeah, let's
hopefully,
hope so.
And quicker. And then the last thing, what's the last new comedy actor you've seen that anyone listening to this should check out? Oh,
gosh, such a good question, because I don't always get to see.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Especially when you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, but there was somebody I saw recently. Who was that? Oh, no, my show is called Goldfish, so I have to be forgiven on names. There's a lovely act. He came to see me the other night, Jacob Newsey.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
Amazing.
So check him out.
Jacob Newsey.
Yeah.
Right, let's go and check him out on socials, find him.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nina. Thanks again for
You're so welcome.
For getting on my podcast again, and hopefully it won't be, another 10 years till I have another one. But if it is, so. I'll come and hunt you down.
Okay, Tim.
Thanks, Nina.
Thank you.
The wonderful Nina Gilligan. So a couple of things worth pulling out of that. We talked about how it can really help your creative distinctiveness when you recognise the value of your own unique life path and how taking the road less travelled can be your biggest strength. So see all of those missteps and longer routes you've had to take in your life as part of your creative building blocks, your valuable stimulus, your training. And I loved how Nina described ideas as sentient beings that travel through the world looking for open minds to take them on. It's a lovely way to look at the importance of being open to inspiration, being in tune with your subconscious, and being aware of how we make fresh connections and let ideas brew in our brains. Is that ideas finding us, or us being alert to the ideas as we have them? Either way, it celebrates the concept of an open mind being fertile territory for creative thinking. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, tell your friends, and do subscribe to my email newsletter for exclusive Fist of Firsts news and features and much more. Link in my bios. See you next time. Thanks for listening.